Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The Seattle City Council is sending a measure to voters that could mean major changes to the city's business and occupation taxing system. Why are the council and mayor pushing for this? And why are several business organizations pushing back? Plus, who should be on the Seattle Renters Commission? And will a new expanded surveillance system help with a spike in gun violence in the city? Councilmembers Alexis Rinck and Rob Saka join me to answer these questions and the ones you're sending in too. Next on City Inside Out, Council Edition.
We need to have a space where we're just talking to renters. And I think there are a number of spaces where we do hear from landlords and property managers.
CCTV, when responsibly deployed, can be a part of the broader solution.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. Welcome once again to Council Edition here on the Seattle Channel. I'm Brian Callanan, and with me for this episode I have Councilmember Alexis Rinck, Citywide Position 8. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me here.
Also with us, Councilmember Rob Saka from District 1, which represents the area from South Park and West Seattle all the way up to Soto. Thank you for being here too.
Brian, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Thank you. And full disclosure, folks, I invited new and former Councilmember Deborah Juarez to be on the show. She was sworn in just a few weeks ago. She said she couldn't make it. Looking forward to seeing her soon. But I did want to jump into a question with you, Councilmember Rinck. And first off, congrats on moving ahead to the general election coming up in November here. Looking forward to hosting you and your opponent, Rachel Savage, when we have that moment a few weeks from now. I promise we'll talk about it then, but let's move on to some of the issues the council is doing right now. I want to talk about Seattle Shield. So this is a measure that you were really spearheading with the mayor. The council recently approved this to go before voters in November. This would raise the business and occupation tax exemption, so the B&O tax exemption, from $100,000 to $2 million in gross revenues, meaning most Seattle businesses would no longer pay this tax. It would also increase the tax rate for businesses with revenues above $2 million and potentially bring in about $90 million a year to the city. I know we're going to have a full debate on this issue too here on the Seattle Channel, so if you could please limit your comments to why. Why did you and Mayor Harrell propose this in the first place?
I think important context to this discussion are the federal cuts that our community is facing.
Okay.
My office hears every day from organizations that are losing federal grants. And we're seeing the ramifications of this, as I call it, the big betrayal bill that was passed by our Republican Congress, which includes a myriad of cuts from SNAP to also these Medicaid cuts. And so we're trying to actually take proactive measures, and the Seattle Shield Initiative, I think, offers that opportunity for us to be able to backfill for some of these really devastating cuts that could be facing our community.
Yeah.
And now we're proud to put it, and now it'll be the voters who will decide if this moves forward.
Okay, got it. Councilmember Saka, you know, and I think everybody's heard on council, there's been some pushback on this from the Downtown Seattle Association, some local independent grocers too, who wrote this in an op-ed in the Seattle Times. Seattle Shield won't help high-volume, low-margin businesses like your neighborhood grocery. For grocers like us, operating on razor-thin margins, the increased tax burden on our suppliers will inevitably trickle down to our shelves and our customers' wallets. Again, this is a measure that voters would have to approve, but what do you say to these grocers and maybe other critics out there who would say a plan like this might hurt their businesses and customers who would likely see costs passed on to them?
Yeah, no, it's a perspective that I totally understand and mindful of. And that's why, as part of this Seattle Shield initiative, we specifically included an analysis piece where we have to come back and revisit the current structure. Is it in meeting intended goals, achieving intended outcomes, et cetera? And so it's possible, you know, we might have in the rush and the urgency to get this done and do it as best as we can. And I think we did a good job on that. We might have missed some things. So that's why we're going to continue to ongoing kind of revisit and look for opportunities to make adjustments to address some of these same concerns. But bottom line, as Councilmember Rinck aptly noted, we need this primarily because to guard ourselves against the Trump administration, which is running amok in D.C. and you know, their wild, outrageous, and unlawful policies are showing up, manifesting themselves across the country, and so we need to protect against that. And also, bottom line, we have current law $240 million budget deficit. We're starting to see better results for the spending that we do have, but we also need to make sure we're able to provide essential city services.
Thank you. And I know there's going to be a debate over this over the next couple of months, so I appreciate you bringing
But it's in voters' hands.
That's what I'm saying. That's the most important part of this, I think.
Yep.
I do want to stick to the budget and revenue issues here. Councilmember Saka, let me go back to you. A question from Alexandra, who's concerned about the budget deficit the city is facing. She writes this: how will you approach assessing the mayor's proposed budget reductions? What framework or values will you use to determine whether you will consider budget amendments? For example, rejecting one budget reduction and proposing another. I think Alexandra wants to know what's going to get cut and why. This is always the question you face.
Yes, sir. So I want to thank Alexandra for taking the time to ask that question. Very thoughtful one. Brian and Alexandra, I've been entirely consistent and clear about my values and my approach for this budget session. It's not materially different from how I approached last budget session, with one exception. We need to close this $240 million and growing gap. We have some options with the B&O tax that is now in voters' hands. But we need to approach it in a smart way, in a balanced way, one that recognizes, streamlining various programs and even consolidating programs and overlapping lines of business, potentially cuts, but more importantly now more than ever, given the Trump administration, and that we're starting to see some results on our existing expenditures. Take crime data, for example, homelessness, police hiring, all those things, trending positively in the right direction. Progressive revenue and new revenue is a part of a more balanced, comprehensive approach, and that is the approach that I'll continue to champion as we approach budget this year.
Thank you. And can I ask you a question specifically about revenue? I want to dive in on one point here specifically, because there's this possible 0.1% sales tax hike. This was approved by the state legislature. Cities can do this without voter approval. The money has to go towards public safety. I know the council passed a resolution unanimously a couple of weeks ago saying if the city does end up enacting this tax, 25% of the money would go towards addiction treatment. Council President Nelson was talking about this. And I know we're still waiting for the mayor's budget proposal, but does Seattle need this tax? I know we talk about progressive revenue. This is not progressive. This is regressive. And I wanted to make sure I got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you for raising that point, Brian. Sales tax is regressive, and Washington State has the second most regressive tax code in the country. The only state in the country that has a more regressive tax code than us is Florida, and we're not Florida. I think we hold very different values. We have different structures and different kind of economy, and I think it's also to be clear with voters or with any of the listening public, when we say regressive, we're talking about an upside-down tax code that's putting disproportionate burden on working and poor folks. They're paying more of their own personal income in taxes into our system. So just to break that down, so sales tax is not my favorite option. We know that the county also actually took it up and implemented the sales tax. If Seattle decides to implement this sales tax, we would actually have the highest sales tax in the country. I think that's hard to stomach for a number of folks in this budget environment. And there's an opportunity for us to be able to fund some really important services using this funding. And I know we passed a resolution, and I've stated this publicly. If we are to go in this direction, I'd like to see us use all of those funds that would come in going towards some of the things that were outlined in that resolution. So our substance use disorder treatment and really stabilizing our behavioral health system. I think we can all agree our behavioral health system is very undernourished. It's not meeting the needs of our community. So if we are to go in this direction, I would push for all of that funding should go towards stabilizing those services.
Councilmember Saka, some thoughts on this possible 0.1% public safety sales tax hike? What do you think about it?
Yeah, so it will definitely be part of the broader conversation. And I think we need to look at this potential proposal in the context of the broader budget conversation.
Yeah, we're waiting for so many things with the mayor.
Part of that involves, waiting on the mayor's proposed budget, what's in there, and potential gap opportunities. As you noted, as Councilmember Rinck noted, we do have one of the most regressive tax structures in the entire country. And I am proud, personally, of the work that went into, so I want to thank Councilmember Rinck and the mayor for proposing it, and my colleagues at the council and myself for making it even better. Because we have such an upside-down tax structure, that helped to right-size the tax structure, and because under that proposal, 90% of businesses will see either no or actually see their tax burden go down.
Right.
So that is a very progressive revenue.
Okay.
On the other hand, what you asked about before us is the potential for the sales tax. That is one option that the state legislature empowered municipalities, including Seattle, with. And so we will have to thoughtfully consider that, as part of the broader budget conversations.
Okay. Looking forward to that. Councilmember Saka, I want to jump back to you and talk about the comprehensive plan. So this is the roadmap to urban growth in the city for the next 20 years. We've been talking about this for some time. The council's looking closely at this. More than 100 amendments have been added to this plan by the council over the last couple of weeks. There's another public hearing coming up on September 12th. Watch out for that. So here's a question for you, Councilmember Saka, from Steve. He's raising some concerns about some of your amendments to add a transit security policy to the plan, a pothole policy, a workforce development policy, among others. Steve is asking this. I am curious as to why Councilmember Rob Saka appears to be adding more red tape and reducing housing options in his most recent amendments to the comprehensive plan, whereas most of the rest of the council have been working to make it easier to add housing to the city. A little bit of pepper on that one. How do you respond?
Yeah, no, I appreciate Steve's feedback there. And I think for clarity, what he's talking about are some of my specific amendments. I had 19 total, plus 4 or 5 other ones ancillary that are better fit in the companion resolution. But I think he's talking about some of my amendments to the transportation element.
Yes.
And as transportation chair, I take my responsibility and duty to go through with a fine-tooth comb the mayor's entire proposal end to end, and especially paying close attention to the transportation element as transportation chair. And so I think the proposals, I would respectfully disagree that they would add burden and onus. I think that they are mostly in line with existing policy. I'm talking about improving accessibility for all. I'm talking about increased mobility, micro-mobility options, electrifying not just personal vehicles, but buses, transit, wheelchairs and bicycles and the like. So I would respectfully disagree on that characterization. I think my proposals put our city in line with our city's values and don't impose unnecessary burden or strain on anyone, and are going to best position us to build more housing.
Thank you for responding to that. And Steve, thank you for the question, too. Councilmember Rinck, how about another perspective here, a question on the comp plan to you. Catherine writes this. My neighbors and I are concerned about the prospect of a 4 or 5-story multifamily home on a single-family lot, and we don't want further destruction of our tree canopy to create these multifamily homes. We know that additional housing is needed in Seattle, but the proposed changes, in our view, are too dramatic and will likely favor developers over prospective home owners. A lot packed in there. We're talking about concern over trees, concern over this favoring developers. How do you respond to that?
Absolutely. No, well, appreciate the question. I think what's clear from our 100+ amendments that my colleagues have put together, I think I have 21.
But who's counting? Yeah.
Who's
come on.
It's not a
race. It's not a race. Yeah, right.
But I bring these points up to say it's clear that we're listening and we're trying to be reflective of what we're hearing from our residents. And this is an emotional and big topic. We're talking about the future of our city. We're talking about who's going to be able to live in this city and what the quite literal landscape of this city will look like. And so I understand that for many folks, they may be feeling concerns about how their neighborhoods will change. I think for our office, what we've been prioritizing has been the matter of affordability and knowing that we have a housing shortage in this city. I mean, we just had 20,000 new neighbors come in the past year. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we have a city that so many folks want to live in, and also, candidly, so many folks are fleeing to, whether it be due to climate emergency or just for the protection of their own civil rights. We know that Seattle is a refuge for the LGBTQ community. We're a state that is protecting access to gender-affirming care and access to an abortion. So there's a lot for us to be proud of as a city, and recognizing that we're going to have a lot of new neighbors, and we want to make sure that our new neighbors have a place to be, and our existing neighbors are also able to stay in this community. And more housing is a key part of that. And actually, in our transportation committee meeting just last week, what's time? Last week?
Yeah, right. Again, who's counting? Right, yeah.
So thank you, Chair Saka, for hosting Puget Sound Regional Council's executive director. And we were talking about, Puget Sound Regional Council's work is connected to our city's work on the comp plan. We're a part of a larger regional effort in growth management planning. And in talking about some of the regional transit work and that they're taking up. You know, one of the questions we were talking about was the climate element. And the first thing that the executive director of Puget Sound Regional Council said as it relates to our climate element and how cities can be taking up climate action is by building more housing more densely in cities. The more we're able to keep folks nearby where they go to work, where they go to school, where they're going for fun, the more we can reduce urban sprawl, minimize our emissions, and so on. And so that's a big reason why, and I'll conclude on this point, my office put forward an amendment that would bring back 8 of the initially studied neighborhood centers from the previous version, and these include Alki, Dawson, Roanoke Park, South Wedgwood, Gasworks, Broadview, Loyal Heights, and Nickerson. We wanted to bring those back up for discussion, and just this past weekend, my team was out biking around to each of those neighborhood centers to meet with neighbors and small business owners to talk through what do you want the future of this neighborhood to look like, and talking through those pain points, like what would it mean to build some more housing, what does that realistically mean, you know, talking about things from the width of the street to also what kind of neighborhood stores do you want? And I'll tell you this, Brian, everyone wants to be able to walk to a grocery store.
Can I throw that? Please,
I build on?
Because I heard Alki in there too, and that's in your district.
Well, sure. But I just want to build upon. So there are 104 whatever amendments, and who's counting? And then, you know, Councilmember Rinck has 21. I have 18. Who knows? I think that's reflective of how much we all care.
Yes.
How much we are all doing our level best to try and bring to life the community feedback that we're hearing from so many different channels. And so, we definitely understand it engenders a lot of intense passion and emotions and feelings for some. Change is hard. It can be hard for some. You know, regardless of the pace of the change that people have individual comfort levels with. But, you know, these, I think, holistically, and we're going to continue to have some of these policy debates over time. Nothing's final. All these are essentially proposals at this time. But like on the workforce development proposal in the Duwamish Valley in my district, some of the most worst off from the climate crisis pollution perspective. These are community features and elements that our communities are demanding that we put in. And again, nothing's baked and nothing's final just yet. But I think it is a reflection of the community's input, not just our individual offices.
Some more input here. Jeremy wrote an email to me, and he actually is in your district. Councilmember Saka asked this: what can our council do in conjunction with the corner store amendment to make actual impact in supporting small businesses popping up in neighborhoods? I want to talk about this briefly. It can be a contentious issue for some neighbors I know, but then there's this idea of supporting small businesses. Some thoughts about this? Yeah,
so corner stores are important, and I'm glad it's a feature that was included in the mayor's proposed package here. I had my own amendment on corner stores. And there, as we saw during the broader conversation, we have some competing amendments on corner stores. So I think as a principled position, it's very clear that as a whole, there is some consensus among the council rallying around the construct of corner stores. The question becomes, to what level do we roll these out? Well, like, there's, you know, various considerations in terms of hours and among other things, but we need to support small business. We need to better, as a city, live up to the notion, this goal of a 15-minute walkable neighborhood. And one way to do that, not the only way, Brian, but one way to do that, adding more corner stores.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rinck, I want to make sure I touched on your Roots to Roofs plan, which is adjacent to this. I think this is a program to add density and height bonuses for developers, especially those who might be working in areas with a history of racially restrictive situations happening there. Former Councilmember Morales introduced something similar to this a couple of years ago about equitable development. The council was not on board with it at the time. What's different this time around with this?
Certainly. Appreciate the question. And special shout out to former Councilmember Morales for her work on this. I know she worked tremendously hard across 2 years engaging with community-based developers and community broadly to find a way to support equitable development. And the Connected Communities legislation was that. I think there's some key differences here, and the first of which I want to note, I was so proud to have been able to collaborate with Chair Solomon's office on this legislation while also working to make toward changes to the legislation to address constituent feedback that was raised last year. Some of the key differences include we've removed the bonus area for the high-risk displacement map. So we're putting a greater emphasis on areas that have had historically racially restrictive covenants, meaning quite literally locking out folks of color from homeownership opportunity, which much of north of the Ship Canal has been, and including a number of other areas. So by removing that high-risk displacement map bonus, we've essentially elevated the additional bonus associated with any property that has had a racially restrictive covenant. And University of Washington has done some good research on this and how it's shown up locally in this community. We're also bringing back the owner unit incentive with retention of owner equity from the landowner. And then also earlier this year, Council passed, interim legislation on House Bill 1110, allowing us to implement missing middle. So we are able to build on that. So being able to expand a little bit more on FAR and build a little bit higher. So being able to build more. So those are some of the key differences between the previous version of the legislation. I think it's important to note that the key spirit of this is we want to be able to help some of these community-based developers be able to build affordable housing for the communities that they serve, while also trying to reckon with our zoning and land use policies of the past by creating more housing opportunity in neighborhoods that haven't seen density, haven't seen growth.
Okay, thank you for that. I did want to make sure I got to another point here. I want to clear the air on appointing the Renters Commission. Councilmember Saka missed a meeting a couple weeks ago with a family emergency. Meeting didn't have a quorum. I know there was some words said. Are you guys cool? Have you talked with each other? Do we have this figured out? Is it okay? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I think we're
I think
cool.
so.
I think, Council, and I want to say, I think we're both committed to working on communication moving forward and making sure, we are, Council is a team in essence. We may represent different districts or have different constituencies, but we're a team fundamentally, and that means good communication for all parties. And so I know we share the intent of wanting to make sure that renters are represented, and we're moving together in tandem. So
sure sounds like it.
No, I mean, just to build upon that, I'm committed with Councilmember Rinck, along with every last one of my council member colleagues, to being the best, most communicative and collaborative person possible. It's not always possible under certain circumstances, but in any event, I think we have a shared goal of that, and we also, the public wants us all to work together. Regardless of whatever sort of where one's slotted on any particular issue, public wants us to work together. And I've enjoyed working with Councilmember Rinck since she's been almost a year now. But I've also enjoyed working with all my colleagues. And so, but on the broader issue of renters and renters' rights. Because this is an important issue. It's an important issue for our city. And it's not just our ability or inability to make progress on this issue impacts more than just renters. And so this is the cornerstone of affordability. A recent data disclosure revealed that over the last 10 years in King County, the average price of a one-bedroom apartment increased 58%. And that's county-wide. No doubt in the city of Seattle, it's higher than that.
Yeah, you want a one-bedroom place, it's $92,000 is how much you have to make a year. The Seattle Times was talking about
Insane.
That.
So out of hand, I'm also told that there's some current, it's sort of a renter's market right now, so there's some stability in the market, but we need to do a better job, especially longer term, to address that. I'm committed to working with folks in the Renters Commission, all impacted stakeholders, figuring out how we can get a better policy grip of this, because coincidentally right now we're going through an MFTE revision proposal.
Multifamily tax exemption,
Comp plan ties to it. There's any number. We passed, and I'm proud to have championed a bill. Co-sponsored a bill during budget last year to add $3.3 million to provide for increased rental assistance. We all recently passed the bill to ban algorithmic discrimination in price fixing of rents. So there's various policy options that are available. We need to keep pulling them.
I hear what you're saying. I do want to talk to you, Councilmember Rinck, because the council did end up approving 14 renters to be part of this board a couple weeks ago. Some landlords have reached out with their concerns. I know you've heard this too. Angie wrote this in an op-ed in the Seattle Times recently. A strong rental housing environment requires tenants and landlords to work together. Council members sent a strong business as usual message recently with autopilot appointments of a non-representative range of renter activists to the existing commission. Why doesn't the Renters Commission have landlords on it, I think is the bottom line question here.
Why doesn't the Women's Commission have men on it?
Okay.
I make a joke, but to illustrate a larger point that, we are a majority renter city in Seattle. And as Councilmember Saka very pointedly noted, 58% is a large increase. And being a renter myself, and I think a lot of folks in the city have been a renter at one time, know about the power dynamics that can exist with, within landlord-tenant relationships. And I think that there is a large power imbalance that we continue to see. The majority of the city may be renters, but the majority of the city isn't landlords. And so while I think we find ways to engage with folks who are property managers and landlords to understand those kind of issues, it's still important to elevate and understand the renter perspective, especially given that the amount of renters that are rent burdened in this city, and that folks who are renters are also folks who become homeless. And so just by having a space where we can ensure that perspective is heard, I think is really important for just good policy making. Again, if we want to get to the bottom of these affordability challenges that too many in our community are facing, we need to have a space where we're just talking to renters. And I think there are a number of spaces where we do hear from landlords and property managers.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Councilmember Saka, I want to make sure I touch on public safety with you. There's been a spike in gun violence. As you know, you serve on the Public Safety Committee, and I know this is very important to you and all the council members, too. This has been happening in West Seattle, all around the city recently. Seattle's recently expanded its surveillance camera capabilities in the CID, also in Capitol Hill. There are plans for the Central District and Pike Pine corridors, possibly down the line. Are more cameras the answer? Talk to me about how you're approaching this issue of violent crime. I'm sure your office is hearing a lot about this.
Absolutely. So violent crime and gun violence, although the trends seem to be, by the data, the trends seem to be going in the right direction in terms of overall declines citywide. Problem is, I'm not going to throw a stat sheet in one of my constituents' face and tell them when they're experiencing the impacts of gun violence or crime in their own neighborhoods, in their backyard. And so in terms of the broader strategy or solution, yes, I do think things, crime prevention and crime fighting technologies like CCTV, when responsibly deployed, can be a part of the broader solution. So I'm proud, for example, that some of those are going to go into my district in SoDo, the Stadium District, because, again, it's part of a broader, comprehensive approach and solution to prevent crime, and also, once crime happens, to provide some investigative support to the officers. And so, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I'm so sorry we're out of time, and I want to thank all the people who've written in: Irene, Steve, Riley, Eric, Jameson. Everyone on the West Seattle blog wrote a lot of different notes here. I'm going to do my best to get those messages through to the council members here because I couldn't ask all of them on the show. I guess I'll wrap up by asking, what are your plans for this break, as it were, over the next 2 weeks? I know council members are always busy, but what's happening over the August break here? Councilmember Saka?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Brian. Just going to enjoy some family time.
Okay.
Me and the family, and maybe a few cartoon characters along the way.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Take a deep breath. Do what you got to do there. Councilmember Rinck?
I will be spending my break stewarding Saint Rat in Capitol Hill. I'm kidding.
Okay, not that. Okay.
I'm kidding. But I would recommend any viewers to go make the pilgrimage out to see the Saint Rat mosaic in Cal Anderson.
Okay.
I think it's a hot rat summer, so go see Saint Rat themselves. I will be out of office. I'll be doing a bit of traveling and viewing other cities. So I'll be going international. And the city nerd in me is always curious to see how other cities are doing things, and so hoping to bring some good learnings back to share with my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Rinck, Councilmember Saka. Thanks a lot for joining us. I'm Brian Callanan. We'll see you next time on Council Edition.